Good evening and welcome to this Tuesday, May 16th, 2017 meeting of the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. Let me remind commissioners, please make sure your microphone is lighted and speak into the mic for the record. And we'll call roll. Commissioner Anderson.
Present.
Commissioner Armstrong. Commissioner Bowie. Commissioner Crane.
Present.
Commissioner Fizer.
Present.
Commissioner Meiske.
Present.
Commissioner Sarsfield.
Present.
Mayor Turnbow.
Present.
And Commissioner Faulkner is present. We do have a quorum this evening. No items under personal appearances this evening. And one item on the consent agenda, acceptance of minutes from the May 2nd, 2017 meeting. And unless any of the commissioners have a concern about the minutes, I would entertain either a motion to approve the consent agenda or to accept case 17, no, I'm sorry, to accept the minutes from the May 2nd, 2017 meeting.
Mr. Chair, I make a motion that we approve the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Meiske. Oh, I'm sorry, was it? Okay, so much for my hearing. Yeah, second by Commissioner Crane, sorry.
No, Sarsfield, one more.
Oh, Sarsfield. Okay, I'm hearing voices from all around. So I don't want to make you raise your hand for a motion, but sorry about that. Okay, let's try this again. Motion by Commissioner Anderson, second by Commissioner Sarsfield to accept the consent agenda as presented. And all those in favor, please raise a hand. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. I have 6 in favor, none opposed, and I will abstain since I wasn't here. So minutes are good. And we will move ahead. Nothing this evening under old business, and that takes us into our case, new business this evening, case 17015, a rezoning request for Heritage Hills lots 158 through 175. I request a rezone from R1 single family to R2 single and 2 family. Case will require a public hearing. And would the applicant like to come forward to the podium and present your case?
Good evening. I'm Brian Glenn with Phoenix Engineering at 3855 South Northern Boulevard in Independence, representing CT Midland LLC. The applicant is requesting the R2 zoning on a currently platted property that has an R1 zoning. As you may recall, a few weeks ago we did a similar zone change case for the property to the north. Other than that, I believe it's a straightforward request, and we have no other presentation.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Glenn. And for the record, let me note that Commissioner Bowie is also now present. And Mr. Grass or Mr. Carteret, if you would, give us the staff report on case 17015, please.
Thank you. As Mr. Glenn indicated, CT Midland is the applicant. They are requesting to reclassify the zoning of Heritage Hills lots 158 through 175 from the existing R1 single-family residential zoning district to the R2 single and 2-family zoning residential district. I've included in the packet here a couple maps that show the location of the property. You can see it's located just south of Pine Street and north of the Ramblewood subdivision there on Samantha Street. A couple of the photographs of the property I've taken here for you tonight. Here you can see the first one there is the view looking north along Washington Street. The current road ends at the southern boundary of the property in question this evening. And in that picture there at the bottom of page 2, to the east of the property here, or to the left side, there is PUDs, or to the right side, I'm sorry, there's PUD zoning there with the Ramblewood neighborhood, and then R3A zoning district to the west there with the point at Raymore Townhomes. Moving on to page 3, I've shown a couple pictures here of what the property line looks like towards the south of the property in question. You can see there's a little bit of a natural buffer with a tree line or an old fence line along the southern boundary of that property that separates the existing R1 zoning designation from the PUD and the R3A zoning to the south. And then moving on to page 4, there's a couple pictures that show kind of what Pine Street looks like currently. You can see the view looking south from Pine Street along the future connection of Washington Street, as well as what Pine Street currently looks like looking east. You can see it sort of dead ends right there and turns into a gravel road. But moving forward, any development that occurs on this, that'll be improved to continue along over towards Washington Street, or Franklin, I'm sorry. As I mentioned before, the existing zoning is R1 Single Family Residential District, and it's surrounded to the north by R2 Single and Two Family Residential Zoning, R3A and PUD zoning to the south, another R1 Single Family Residential District to the east, and then C2, a General Commercial District to the west. The future land use map classifies this area as appropriate for low-density residential, and the major thoroughfare plan classifies Pine Street and Washington Street as a minor collector. Since this is a public hearing, notices were sent to surrounding property owners, and it was advertised in the April 27th edition of the Journal newspaper. And then I've listed the other items of record as well for your viewing. We've also included the requirements that are required for rezoning and a zoning map amendment that are included there for you all. Moving on, as far as previous planning actions on or near the property, I wanted to go into a little bit more detail with this that might lend itself to the rezoning of this property. This lot was originally platted back in 1986, and it was recorded in 1987. However, before that time, back in 1979, the official zoning map designated this area as R3 apartment house zoning, which permitted the construction of single-family, two-family, and multifamily dwelling units. In 2000, the official zoning map designated this area as an R3 multiple family dwelling district, which permitted the construction of only multiple family dwelling units. Single family and two family were not permitted. And then 2004, the city of Raymore adopted a new official zoning map, and to prepare for that, staff did research on any rezoning ordinances and bills that had been completed since that time. And however, since no ordinance was found on this property that justified the R3 zoning that was existed, it was reverted back to the R1 single-family district zoning that it has today. So that's kind of how we got to where we're at today from back in 1979. Just to the south, the point at Raymore Townhomes, those were rezoned in 2009 from R3B apartment community residential district to the R3A multiple family residential district, and that allowed for the construction of single-family attached dwellings, so the townhomes that you see constructed there today. And then the property to the north, as Mr. Glenn noted, several months ago, back in March, that property, Heritage Hills, lots 136 through 157, those were rezoned from the R1 single-family residential district to R2 single and two-family residential district. That property, like you mentioned, is also owned by the applicant here tonight. We did have a good neighbor meeting on May 3rd, earlier this month. We had 2 or 3 neighbors that showed up that had a couple questions for us. The main ones were, they were curious about how many homes were going to be built on the property. The applicant indicated that on this property, there'll be 18 homes built on here, and between the 2 properties to the north and the south, there'll be a total of 40 homes built. The next question was, what is going to be the size of the homes that are going to be built? And the applicant indicated there'll be a mix of 2 and 3 bedroom units, but predominantly it'll be 2 bedroom units throughout. And then they were also curious as to whether or not they were going to be individually owned or sold off to individual owners. The applicant indicated that they will retain ownership of all the properties on this lot and on this property, and they're in the process of forming an HOA that will have certain restrictions on the uses of the property as far as what can be stored outside, property maintenance and things like that. And maintenance of the properties as far as lawn care will be provided. There were some concerns about the traffic impact of the future connection of Washington Street, as well as what the impact of 40 additional homes will do to the area. With Washington Street being connected to Foxwood, that'll obviously provide a little bit more connection up to Foxwood. But it's believed that once Pine Street is completed, that'll be the main access for residents in this area to 58 Highway. As far as open space, they were curious if there was going to be any dedicated open space areas or green space areas as part of this development. There won't be any areas specifically dedicated for green space, but the stormwater detention pond areas, those will offer a little bit of green open space for the residents of this neighborhood. Staff had a number of comments here for you all to consider tonight. As I mentioned before, the purpose of the R2 single-family and two-family residential district is to accommodate a mix of single-family and two-family dwelling units, so single-family homes and duplexes. We've included the use table that shows the permitted uses of both the R1 and the R2 zoning district. The applicant intends to use the original plat of Heritage Hills, 158 through 175 that you see here tonight that was platted back in 1986. And those lots do comply with the requirements of the R2 zoning district and the R1 zoning district. There are no screening requirements that are required for the R1 or the R2 zoning district. However, future development that will occur on the commercial property to the west that will require a type A screening between either the R1 or the R2, depending on the decision tonight, and that commercial property to the west. And as I noted in the pictures, there is that natural screening buffer to the south that separates the PUD zoning and the townhomes there from the property in question this evening. And then development on the subject property will require the connection of Washington Street south between Pine Street and Samantha Street, which I also showed in one of the pictures previously in the staff report. And as I mentioned, the applicant also has ownership interest in that property to the north as well to the east. They're currently pursuing the development of 22 two-family dwelling units on the platted lots that exist to the north. As I said, they applied back in March of this year to rezone those lots from R1 to R2 to accommodate the mixture of single-family and two-family lots. And moving on, in its engineering, or in its memorandum, the engineering division provided a memo for your all's consideration tonight to indicate that the adequate facilities and services do exist to serve the proposed development. We've also included proposed findings of facts for your consideration this evening. And looking ahead, should the commission recommend approval for this case tonight, moving ahead, it'll be scheduled for first reading by City Council on May 22nd of this month, and for second reading on June 12th. Overall, staff does support this recommendation of approval. As I said, the applicant has ownership interest in the area surrounding this property and is pursuing development of two-family units to the north. There's a mixture of single-family and multiple-family dwellings to the south and commercial to the west. So there's a fair mixture of different uses going on here. And the property was platted back in 1986 and has never seen developed since then. So it'll be good to have some development going on there. So the city staff does recommend that the commission accept the proposed findings of fact and forward case number 17015 to the city council with a recommendation of approval. So if you have any questions of staff, I'll be happy to answer those for you.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Grass. Any questions of staff before we move on? All right. Get that out of the way. Let me open the public hearing on case 17015, and as always, if anyone from the public wishes to speak on this case, we'll give you an opportunity to come forward to the podium. Please give us your name, address for the record, and I don't think we're too worried tonight about a big crowd, but we'd ask that you limit your comments to 3 minutes or so, if you would. Give us your name and address, please.
My name is Josh Anderson. I'm at 245 Jenny Lane of Ramblewood, on the corner of Jenny Lane and Franklin Street. My question is there going to be a separation between the two neighborhoods from Ramblewood and Heritage Hills? My concerns are just quality of residence. So that's what I have. Those are my questions.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Grass.
Sure.
Would you
Fair
like
question.
to address that now?
Yeah, as I mentioned in the staff report, the screening isn't necessarily required of the developer between those two different zoning districts. between the PUD zoning that exists where your property is and the R2 zoning or the R1, depending on the decision tonight. That's not a requirement of the developer. That's sort of up to them whether they wish to keep that buffer there. You could certainly, the commission could certainly pass this case or approve it with the condition that they are required to keep that as part of the development. That would certainly be up to the commission to discuss and decide. And again, that would also be up to the applicant to keep that screening as well, depending on the decision of the commission this evening.
Okay,
Yeah.
all right.
Thank you. Anything
you.
else? Thank
I
you.
think that's it.
What type of screen are you, if I may?
Yeah, Commissioner
What
Bowie.
type of screening are you talking? The natural buffer?
Yeah,
or-
so currently, there's the natural tree line that exists on that southern property line there that looks like it used to be an old fence line or property line. There's sort of a natural buffer with the vegetation and trees that exist there today that provides a somewhat of a buffer. There's still some gaps in between there where it's not fully grown or
What's the height of those trees?
I'd say a couple of them are probably about 30 or 40 feet. The other ones are probably about 10 or 15. It kind of varies depending on where you're at. It's
Okay. Okay, thank you.
Would anyone else from the public like to speak on this case? And seeing none, we'll close the public hearing on case 17015 and move on into discussion by the commission. So kind of following up on Commissioner Bowie's question, it's been a while since I've gotten in deep on the tree preservation ordinance. I think we have one, but I did note, whether it was on this case or related case involving basically the old tree farm to the north, I think I noted that there was not a requirement that the developer preserve the trees. So I'm kind of assuming, am I correct, that we don't have anything in the tree preservation ordinance that would require those trees on the south side to be preserved? Mr. Carteret?
Currently, the Unified Development Code does not have a specific tree preservation provision, especially since this is already platted, final platted land. They're already legal lots of records. So in the Unified Development Code, when we have a new preliminary plat moving forward, when somebody's coming in to develop completely from scratch a new tract of land, the commission has the ability to do tree preservation at that point in time. But we are far past that on this particular stage, which is why the land area to the north that you mentioned, that was rezoned a few months ago, there was no requirement for preservation of trees. Some of the perimeter trees were kept, some of the in the drainage area, et cetera. But at this point, the ordinance does not require any tree preservation. But as Mr. Gress indicated, certainly in the purview of the commission to consider asking the applicant about preservation of some of the trees that exist along the tree line. It looks like it's principally, correct me if I'm wrong, Mr. Gress, but north of Samantha Street appears to be where the bulk of the trees on this tract of land currently
Right.
are.
Yeah, specifically, I was just intending to talk about this tract, we'll call it lots 158 through 175, but yeah, I was curious, good intentions being one thing, insects, drought, kind of work the opposite way sometimes, and it's not always possible to preserve everything, but I do remember, and actually it's probably been a long time ago, but I remember when Culver's was developed that we worked very hard to preserve some mature trees, which I think have added to the quality of the appearance there. So seems like a good thing to do, but I would agree with you, Mr. Carteret. This was platted so very long ago that it's really far past that point in time. Other commissioners, do you have questions, comments? Commissioner Bowie?
Yeah, I've looked this package over, and maybe I missed this, and I don't know, the relevance of it, but maybe you can just kind of speak to, you talked about the developer planning to possibly do some other development to the east, or they have some interest there to the east and so forth.
correct.
Are they planning to, are these going to be rentals? Are they going to be sold individually, or was there any talk about that? Since you kind of brought up an HOA and so forth, can you give us an idea kind of what their plans may be?
Sure. So the two properties, the ones north of Pine Street, the one we rezoned a few months ago, and then the one in question tonight south of Pine Street, those will all be rental properties, but they will all be, the ownership will be retained by the applicant. So they will not be individually sold, they'll all be rented, and they'll be managed by an HOA, property maintenance company, something of that sort. So they'll be rented out individually, maintenance will be provided as part of the monthly rent, as far as waste removal, tree and yard care. As far as the property to the east, and when I spoke to the applicant at the Good Neighbor meeting, they indicated that's a few years out of their kind of sights right now as far as developing. They do own that land, and they do intend to develop it at some point in time. But right now, I think they're focusing on the Heritage Hills to the north of Pine Street and to the south.
Okay. And then in terms of an HOA, how does that fall into play here in terms of what they, because you mentioned an HOA, and I might have missed it, but.
Right. So the applicant will be forming a homeowners association that will oversee the, I guess, property maintenance of the units in this neighborhood.
Okay.
Like I said, the maintenance and the lawn care of the units in the neighborhood, and just, like he said, enforcing the different, I guess, just ensuring that the quality of the homes remains to their standard, as far as enforcing, whether or not you can park trailers on the driveway, where you have to store your trash cans, where they're not in use, just making sure that little things like that are being paid attention to, so the quality of this development isn't kind of going downhill as it sits there.
Do they have any interest in any other places throughout Raymore?
Yes.
Are they currently managing a property somewhere in Raymore?
Yes, the property owner, I believe the father of the property owner owns several properties just north of Foxwood right there, a couple on there. The name of the apartment complex is slipping me right now. If you can
Right behind the
clarify.
fire station on North Park, there's a line on the west side of the road. And I believe there's 7 duplexes down that line right behind the fire station.
And they own that one, though, they own those as well?
Owned them 30 years now.
Okay, thank you.
So, Mr. Fleming, I always like to get my money's worth, and thank you for being here tonight. So I kind of want to summarize, just make sure I'm clear on this and for a little bit of clarity with the commission. So a couple of things that I believe, and Mr. Fleming, feel free to correct me, but the homeowners association is planned, but I don't really find that that has specific relevance to our case this evening, which is simply a rezoning request from R1 to R2. So good to know, but in my mind, really doesn't, the Homes Association, yes or no, doesn't have any bearing on the merit of rezoning from R1 to R2. The other thing that we've discussed was, well, particularly the property to the east, currently zoned R1, that the applicant also owns or has ownership in. That's somewhere in the future. As far as our case this evening, I would propose that the property to the east is currently zoned R1, and the question before us is whether it is suitable to rezone the property in question, lots 158 through 175, from R1 to R2. The property to the north has already been rezoned or acted upon in a previous case, and so it is currently R2 zoning. And I think the map on page 5 of our staff report pretty well summarizes, here's the surrounding property, and again, the question, as I would see it, is simply the suitability of rezoning the property from R1 to R2. Mr. Fleming?
I agree. The issues, kind of the ancillary issues, some of the ancillary issues that have been raised aren't germane to our proceedings this evening.
Nice to know, but
Right, exactly.
but I'm trying to get us to focus on the case at hand.
Yes. I think that everything that needs to be done in order to comply with Section 470 has been done. There was a Good Neighbor meeting. This body's convening right now. and the 11 findings of fact have been addressed. And
Yeah.
so,
Thank you. And with that good legal advice, I will pose one more question. So looking back at the minutes from our February 21st, 2017 meeting and the case involving the property to the north of this, case 17002, Heritage Hills, lots 136 through 157, the statement was made, if I can find it, page 10, item 9 of staff comments, and we know that the applicant is common to the property to the north and this property. Applicant is currently pursuing development of 18 single-family residential homes on the platted lots that exist at that time to the south of the subject property, which those 18 lots are, in fact, the 18 lots proposed for rezoning tonight. So I'm kind of curious, not wanting to steer us off in a different direction, but it would appear that something has changed from February to May in the thinking, and I guess I'm just curious why the applicant is not still pursuing developing single-family homes as zoned, as platted. Why the request to change to R2? Applicant or staff?
Sean Siebert with CT Midland.
Right, thank you.
The reason why it's changed, this subject property, the request for R2 zoning, there's still going to be some single-family properties built on this track. In the back of the cul-de-sac bulbs, the 2 lots, so 4 total, will still be single-family homes. It just doesn't fit our duplex plan. But the reason why the decision has changed is the property to the east that's down the road, like we said, a couple of years
Right.
down the road. There is some single-family lots to the south and to the north, if we had a bigger picture up there. So the decision has been made. I talked with Jim about it. He thought it would be a good idea. Originally, when we had our initial meeting with Jim, the property to the east, we were going to go for a PUD designation, and it's kind of changed. We think it'd be nice to have a buffer for the single-family lots to the south and the north. So the plan was to kind of take some of those duplexes we were originally planning back there, put them here, and then put single-family back there on the east, on the north and south, to buffer those communities, and then still go for a PUD designation in the center. So it's just, as we got further in the process, we've just kind of changed what our overall plan was for the entire project.
So it's an evolving
Yes.
plan for the overall, this being a part of it.
That's correct. And like I
Okay.
said, currently, we still do plan to build somewhere between 4 and 8 single-family houses on this tract of land.
And as staff noted in the staff report, R2 zoning certainly does permit R1 single family. Well,
Yes.
let's just, I'll leave the R1 off of that, but R2 permits single or duplex development. So, okay, thank you, Mr. Siebert.
Mr. Chair,
Commissioner Anderson.
thank you for bringing up that question. Actually, that's something that I highlighted as well as to why the applicant is changing per what the board had voted on earlier this year here. Thus, my concern with, approving this request, especially after, the owner owns both the north-south and the east property, and I don't feel a comfort level that there's no master plan presented to the board to see exactly overall what exactly we're going to do. That's one concern. And two, we're going back and forth between R1 and R2, single family and duplexes, et cetera, which again, I'm not a fan of, but I just need to see a comprehensive plan from the applicant to see exactly what the final goal is. I think, at least for me, that'll give me some insight on what zoning should be there or not. Right now, I think, and the concern is potentially we could carve up that R2 to the east to multiple, R2 plats, et cetera, at the will of the applicant, but from a for me personally, I don't think that's probably a good plan. So I would like to see a more comprehensive master plan, what we plan or what the applicant plans to do with the lots before I can actually, approve
Right.
my vote.
And I think I know what the answer is, but rather than jump in, Mr. Cataret, Mr. Gress, I think you probably have an answer to Commissioner Anderson, if you would.
I would agree with you. Like you said, moving forward, there's nothing to stop the property owner from moving ahead and filing for a rezoning to rezone that entire east property for R2 duplexes, which certainly would be, their right. They have the right to request that. But, approving this tonight might set some sort of precedent that, you can garnish the approval by saying you're going to do something, but not having that actual plan in place to show what your overall intentions are in the bigger picture. There's certainly that doubt in the back of your mind once you.
And that precedent has been set.
Yes.
And that's always been a concern, and seeing this and reviewing it, and, especially having the applicant owning most of the property here and not having a singular cohesive plan, I don't feel comfortable with that.
Well, I think the answer that I suspect is that if we were starting from scratch, if these properties, meaning 158 through 175, which is the case tonight, the properties to the north, the undeveloped property to the east, if we were starting off from scratch with none of that platted and a single owner, I suspect we'd come in with a preliminary plat, development agreements, et cetera, which I think we're more comfortable with, and that's kind of our expectation today. The reality here seems to me that, and I forget the exact dates, but Mr. Gress gave us a lot of good history. Doesn't this date back to 1986?
689.
87?
1979 was the zoning
Well,
map, the
Right, I'm starting off, I'm starting off there with previous planning actions, lots 158 through 175, final plat approved by the city, April of 1986. So what we've got, to me, Commissioner Anderson, is probably not what we'd really like, but what we've got is that a lot of this work has already been done, and it is already in parcels. We've already taken action in our February meeting on the property to the north, and we don't have a case before us for the property to the east. So I kind of think,
And only bring that up because the applicant did bring that up.
no, I understand it.
And so that was the first one, but hearing the applicant mention, what the plan is going forward to the lot to the east, that kind of sparked another concern.
Right.
Okay.
So I think my question to Mr. Fleming earlier, and I really wasn't anticipating where we'd be at this minute, but I think my question to Mr. Fleming basically kind of harks back, and feel free to jump in here and tell us the same thing all over again, but I think the question before the commission tonight is simply lots 158 through 175 on their own merit. They are currently zoned R1. However, in the history that Mr. Gress has given us in staff report, pages 6 and 7, they have quite a checkered history in terms of, they were identified as R3 in 1979 and 2000, and because staff was not able to locate an ordinance establishing that designation, they were kicked back in 2004. They were kicked back to R1, which is obviously the most conservative zoning. So they've really been flipped and flopped several times, and I think the case before us tonight, the property's currently zoned R1. The developer has given us rationale for requesting R2, and we've got the surrounding properties. I think that map is on page 5, but we've got the surrounding properties and staff proposed findings of fact. Now our question is, do we agree? Anything to add?
I don't.
Okay. Yeah, Commissioner Sarsfield.
Mr. Kydirek, it's to you, I guess, since you've been here the longest. Is there a ratio when we have a plot of, like there's 18 lots here? Is there a ratio in the ordinance that says it's supposed to be split up 50-50 between R1 and R2? Or you could put one R1 in there and in this case 17 R2s in, duplexes. But is there a limit on one more than the other, or is it done by the individual houses? Even though the duplexes count as 2 per lot, that would actually increase it as almost a 3-to-1 or a 4-to-1 ratio of duplexes to R1 buildings.
When you look at the 18 lots, yeah, you probably want to start with the fact that going to the R2 allows a duplex in all 18 lots, so you end up with 36 units. So that would be your maximum density, your maximum number of units that would be. But the RR2 district actually was crafted to allow a mixture of single and duplexes. So there's no specific ratio that we would limit or control what type of unit is built on each lot. The owner of each individual lot can come in and decide they want to build a single family or they want to build a duplex. So we could end up with just 18 dwelling units or as many as 36. It's really going to be individual as each lot comes forward for a permit. What that owner, and we assume it's the applicant, will be the owner, that they'll come forward and make the decision on whether to build single family or two family. But as you're looking at the rezoning, you would want to think about the possibility that every lot could be a two-family, because once you zone it R2, every lot can be R2. The applicants indicated that's not the plan, but just in thinking, maximum number of units we could be faced with, look at it that way. But a long answer to your question, there is no specific ratio of how many lots can be single or duplex.
So it is currently R1, and it will go to R2, or is it R1/R2?
It would go to the R2 district.
I see.
RR2 happens to allow the R1 uses.
I see.
Yeah. So, I would make some assumptions that, development is market-driven. The developer will presumably build or offer, and I think we've heard, developer intends to keep ownership of the properties, but at the same time, I don't know that there's anything specifically that would prevent the developer from changing the plan, selling off individual platted lots in this property. So the assumption is simply that the developer or a builder that might take possession of those lots will build what he believes is asked for by the market.
Mr. Chair,
And-
if I could.
Mayor Turnbow.
Yeah. When we considered the other plat or zoning, if you look on page 10 of the packet tonight, it shows the previous R2 distinction that we approved back in February.
Right.
And part of the reasoning of that was that was going to neighbor existing R2 along Foxwood Drive. It almost appears to me like it's a zone creep on behalf of the property owner, and I'm not willing to vote on a change in the zoning tonight, as Mr. Anderson stated, without some type of master plan so that we understand what the future plans are for that property. It could come in 4 other sections looking at the size of the other R1 area, and I saw the reasoning because there was already R2 existing, and now we're going to use the same reasoning. Again, it just looks like zone creep to me, and I'm not willing to do that. So anyway, just my 2 cents worth.
Right. Other commissioners? I agree with you, Mayor Turnbow, and I think that's one of my concerns as well that probably prompted the question about why the change in direction from what we heard in February. And obviously, we've learned over the years that one thing about plans is plans change. And sometimes they change for the better, sometimes we're probably not sure. Again, you know, this is kind of my personal thought process on the case, so for the moment, I happen to be looking at the map on page 10 of the staff report. You know, the existing properties, we have R2 to the north, we have C2 to the west, we have R3A on part of the south, we have a PUD on the other part of the south, and as you noted, we currently have R1 zoning on the large tract to the east. However, that's undeveloped, and I guess that tract to the east isn't bothering me as much, because once individuals might buy lots and build houses to the east, they surely can see R2 to the west and make their own decision of whether that's someplace that they want to buy or build or not. So I don't really feel like we're necessarily pulling the rug out from under or changing the zoning that's going to affect a lot of existing surrounding homeowners. Basically, what we've got, as you noted, we've got a string up there in Heritage Hills along East Foxwood that's R2 ranging over to R1. And I guess, yeah, that's the flip side of it is, if we rezone this property to R2, then does that make it easier to rezone the large tract to the east to R2 up against the R1s in Heritage Hills? And that's, yeah. So I think I probably came full circle and zoning creep or whatever term you used, and I do agree with you that that's what this case looks like in part. I think the challenge is we also have staff proposed findings of fact on the appropriateness of rezoning lots 158 through 175 to R2, or recommending rezoning this evening. And should the commission decide to deny, we also have to provide that recommendation to City Council. So we're kind of on the hook, commissioners, for a recommendation to City Council of either accept staff proposed findings of fact, forward with recommendation of approval, or provide an alternate understanding of findings of fact and recommend denial to the council. Okay. Mr. Fleming, that sound like where we are?
Yes.
Mr. Carteret?
Mr. Chairman, if I may, I think it might be helpful. Sometimes when the staff prepares the reports, the thought process that we go through in reviewing the application from, as Mr. Siebert first indicated, we met with the applicant a couple of months even before the initial application was filed. So maybe if I walk through a little bit of the thought process, it may help you understand our recommendation a little bit better. Initially, you know, Mr. Siebert and his development team came in about the entire acreage. So the property to the north, we already rezoned, okay, these lots, and the land to the east. So let's just take it as one package. Of course, we had the two existing plats that were already there with the streets already approved, lots already created, and they came in indicating that they want to develop, use that existing plat. Why go through the process of replatting it? We were talking at the time on the R1 developed area as well about future plans, and from staff standpoint, we knew that the area to the east, not part of this application, but had to go through a much more thorough review process. that tract of land was adjacent to all single-family to the north and single-family in Ramblewood to the south. So that was a lot of discussion early on about how that land was going to develop. We were much more comfortable with the area that you rezoned a few months ago because that was adjacent only to duplexes. And at the time, they were talking about keeping the area to the south of single-family. Quite honestly, I was surprised initially why they weren't rezoning the southern area because it was adjacent to the Point townhomes. And as you indicated, but only half of it's adjacent to the Point. So part of our discussion on our recommendation this evening for, if you would, the east half of the R1 that's adjacent to the PUD was finding out what the interest was of the owner of those undeveloped lots. Because all those lots along Samantha Street there are owned by the same individual, all currently unbuilt. The testimony this evening was from the homeowner at the corner of Jenny and Franklin. And of course, we have multiple single-family homes there now, so very valuable input, and they are certainly going to be impacted by any development that's going to happen to the R1 to the north of them. And so taking into account their comments this evening on the buffer, as part of the preliminary plat, we can require a buffer at that time to provide some protection to the properties, the existing homes there in Jenny Lane. But back to tonight, we were interested in finding out what the owner thought of the request that own those undeveloped lots that are adjacent to that. And we have had, they haven't had an objection. This is from other, the initial developers of the subdivision live in the subdivision and were aware of this and didn't have an objection. And then the new owner of the lots has also not filed an objection to having the duplexes there. So that came into play on our recommendation as well. We share the same kind of reservation on that R1 area to the east. We want to see a master plan. We need to know what's going to happen with that land because right now it's a blank slate. And so you're going to see that as that moves forward. The dilemma we had was that these were platted lots. They could come in and build today, single family. We were just trying to make the decision, is it better to come in today for single family or for single and two family? And we made the decision that single or two family would be appropriate for all those existing lots, especially taking into account the immediate property owners that were impacted have not objected or had a concern. So that was our thought process. We actually asked the developer to hold off on the area to the east, quite frankly. We didn't want them pursuing that up front. Part of that is because of the development that's occurring here, they are duplexes. We know some of the feelings of residents in the community regarding what they consider multifamily. And we wanted to see how this development panned out, to see what kind of units are they building, what's it look like, kind of prove themselves before they came in and tried to do something with the R1 further to the east. I do agree with the master plan. We always want to know up front how the entire land area is being developed. In this case, because we were dealing with existing platted lots, we didn't have that as a possibility for these lots, but we certainly do for the area to the east. So that was just kind of our thinking, Mr. Gress and I, as in moving forward with this. And sometimes we can't put all those thoughts into words on your staff report, but I thought it was kind of hopefully helpful to share what we were thinking on that.
Yeah, I'm getting a head nod from Commissioner Anderson, and I think while we realize that a lot of the discussion of the currently R1 property to the east is still not cast in concrete, but I certainly appreciate at least what we see as future, because I think that answers at least some of our questions. Commissioner Anderson?
It does, Jim. Thank you so much for that. It does give some context, but as you were saying that and kind of looking and staring at my paperwork here, is that as Mr. Mayor had mentioned as well, as far as zone creep here, having a mixed dwelling between multifamily and single family within the same plan zone adds to more confusion, at least in my eyes as well. So it could go either way. Thus, I'm coming back to, or circling back, it'll be nice to have a holistic plan to see exactly what we want to do. I always say a missed opportunity is a missed opportunity. So if we don't do our due diligence here as a commission here, it can go either way. So we have an obligation to the community, not necessarily to the developer.
Thank you. So maybe I'm being presumptuous in looking ahead a little bit this evening, but Mr. Fleming, what I see as potential, and actually right now my biggest concern is what happens with the vote. There are 8 commissioners, including the mayor, present this evening. It would take a vote of a minimum of 5, either to approve or deny the case, and if we don't get a vote of 5 one way or the other, basically, then I think the case, if we split 4 and 4, which is the only other possibility, then the case would go to city council with no recommendation. Does that, I think we've run Mr. Zur through this once or twice in the last few years. We've not subjected you to that kind of torture yet, but does that sound about right?
I think so, but given that this is only my second meeting and I haven't been down this road before, if you... Use your mic. I'm sorry.
Oh, sorry.
Given this is my second meeting and I haven't been down this road before, I would have to probably punt on what would happen.
Let's
in the
defer-
event there's a split down the middle at 4
Let's
to
defer
4.
to Mr. Catarat then.
I think you stated it correctly, so it does take 5 for a binding recommendation. If it is a 4-4 vote, it would still move forward to the council, but with no recommendation.
Right. So 5 in approving the case, recommending approval to city council, or 5 denying the case, recommending denial to city council, or a 4-4 split and no recommendation, and then it goes to council. I always hate to just dump something on them with no recommendation, but I'm being premature because we don't have a motion on the floor yet. Other discussion, questions from the commissioners?
I have a question.
Commissioner Pfizer.
Will both of these areas be managed by the same company? Not the one to the east, but the two, the one that we've already approved and then the one we're talking about tonight?
Yes, as we indicated, they are both owned by the same applicant, both the properties to the north and the south, and the ownership will be retained by the same applicant.
So even if they're single-family homes, there'll be rental property for that area
Yes.
managed by the same? Okay, thanks.
I'll make a motion.
Sure. Why not? Let's try it. Commissioner Anderson, go ahead.
Right. Mr. Chair, I'll make a motion to deny staff proposed finding the facts and forward to case 17015, request to reclassify the zoning of 6.79 acres of land legally described as Heritage Hills, lots 158 through 175, from R1 Single Family Residential to R2 Single and 2 Family Residential District to the City Council with a recommendation of denial.
I'll second that.
Okay.
Okay. I know the voice came, these microphones are awfully. Was that Mayor Turnbow? Thank you. Okay, we have a motion on the floor by Commissioner Anderson, second by Mayor Turnbow. Commissioner Anderson, you did a wonderful job of reading through that. I'm just going to summarize. Motion that the commission deny staff proposed findings of fact, forward the case to rezone lots 158 through 175 from R1 to R2 to City Council with recommendation of denial. Is that clear enough? Okay. Is there any further discussion on the motion? Okay. Since this is backwards from the usual, the motion is to deny the rezoning request. All those in favor of that motion to deny, raise a hand, please. Oh, my. 6, 7. 7 in favor of the motion to deny. Any opposed to the motion? Commissioner Pfizer, and none abstaining. And Commissioner Pfizer, as is our tradition, we would give you the opportunity to speak in opposition to the motion to deny.
Well, I think the biggest factor was that it says that we only have 4% of the dwellings in Raymore are two-family units, and I think it's good to have a variety of home types, and I kind of think in this area I wouldn't pick it to build a house. I don't know. It's kind of locked in, so I think it's kind of a good spot for that type of development, and that's really it. I just think it's good to have a variety of home types in the city, and we don't seem to have a lot.
Thank you. And your comments will go to City Council with the meetings and Commission's recommendation. Thank you. All right. That concludes case 17015, and we'll move ahead. Mr. Fleming, if you would, give us the City Council report, please.
Thank you, Chairman Faulkner. The only thing that I wanted to mention was at the last meeting, Mayor Turnbow announced that Melody Armstrong, a Ward 4 representative, would be added to the Raymore Planning and Zoning Commission. I had hoped to introduce her and welcome her and thank her for her service, but she's not here today, so we will have to do that at our next meeting.
Right. Okay, thank you, Mr. Fleming. Mr. Catarat, if you would, start the staff report for us this evening.
Yes, sir, thank you. So looking at our schedule for upcoming meetings, we do have a meeting in a few weeks on June 6th. We'll have the annual review of the Unified Development Code, and we'll also have the consideration of the Cunningham at Creekmore second plat. The Cunningham at Creekmore first plat actually was approved many years ago, just never built. This was a subdivision off of North Madison Street, kind of the corner of Madison and 155th. They're actually going to be submitting a request to vacate that first plat, but in the meantime, they're moving forward with the second plat. The first plat would be vacated because they're realigning some streets and reconfiguring the lot layout. So those are the two cases. The UDC annual review will be a little bit longer this time. We do have a number of items we would like to recommend the commission to consider on the UDC, so we'll be talking through those items at that time. I have it listed here as a public hearing in your staff report. It's actually not a public hearing. The public hearing would be held if the commission directs staff to do a UDC amendment. So the public certainly will have a lot of time to review and comment on it. This actually is not a public hearing, so I did that.
Would Cunningham at Creekmore?
Is a consent agenda since it's a final plat.
Okay.
Yes, sir. And so those are the only items we currently have scheduled for the commission to review. I know Mr. Gress and I have been talking to another number of other applicants, so there's other applications moving forward. So we'll see about the June 20th meeting. We'll know more in a couple of weeks regarding that meeting. And I also believe that our Board of Adjustment will be meeting on June 20th. They will have a case for consideration that evening as well. So those are the current meetings we have scheduled, and I believe that would conclude staff report at this time.
Did you want to pass it over to Mr. Eanes for comments?
Yes, thank you for the reminder,
Okay.
Mr. Eanes.
Mr. Eanes.
Good evening. I have a few projects I want to update you on. Gore Water Line and Meter Station. Currently, there is 2,200 feet of water line that has been installed. We are looking at the end of June for that project to be completed. Foxwood Water Tower. It has the first coat of light blue paint. It will be cadet blue, as been voted on by the city council, so I just wanted to make note of that. 2016 median beautification is pretty much done. We have a light pole that needs to go on Monroe Street. In 2016 sidewalk, it's almost complete. So That's pretty much all of my projects I have going right now. There's a few more bids that will be coming on later on this month and in the month of June.
Yeah, thank you, Mr. Eanes. I think the next item on our agenda is public comment, and it appears that our public has left for the evening, so we will move ahead to commission member comment, and I think Mr. Cataract, Mr. Grass, Commissioner Anderson, I'm kind of thinking perhaps before we go into commission member comment, would this be a good time to bring us up to date on the annual planning conference in New York? Mr. Cataract, what do you think?
Can I go first?
We'll kind of weave this in with commission member comments. Thank you, Commissioner Anderson.
Not
I
a
didn't even
problem.
have to call on you.
I don't have my formal report, but I do want to submit a formal report for attending the APA meeting in New York. First, I do want to thank Mr. Mayor and the city for allowing me to go. It was, to say it lightly, it was eye-opening. The amount of information and hearing planning talk. There is engineering talk and there's planning talk as well, which was fascinating. I attended quite a bit of meetings. Most of the meetings were related to smart cities, which was near and dear to my heart. I think I asked too many questions where they asked me to be on the technology division of APA, so I did that because I'm doing a lot of work in that area as well, so that was great. And then also in the planning in the African American community as well, division as well. So met a lot of good people from Seattle, from Australia, from New York. A lot of, and we're still talking. Matter of fact, we talked today, which was great. Some of the excursions we went to in Long Island. I tell folks all the time that I love my flyover country here in Kansas City. Some of the things I saw in Long Island, it was great, but you know, I like Kansas City, and they deal with different issues than what we're used to here in Kansas City, specifically here in Raymore, which was eye-opening. And then we also did an excursion up to Stamford, Connecticut as well. It's amazing the amount of wealth there and some of the issues from an economic development standpoint what they're going through. So I do have a formal report that I want to submit to you to have on record. But it was eye-opening. It was great. And again, thanks for the city for allowing me to attend this year. Thank you.
We're looking forward to getting a lot of value from that
A lot.
knowledge.
So
Yes.
be forewarned, it's a lot of information there.
Mr. Cataract, Mr. Grass.
Thank you. I too would like to thank the mayor and the city of Raymore for allowing me to go. It was certainly a really eye-opening experience for someone as young as I am. Fresh out of school, you know, I thought I learned a lot in school, but I learned a lot more over the weekend in New York City. Aside from enjoying the sites and the amount of people that were a shock to me, I had a chance as well to talk with a lot of people from a lot of different states, a couple from out of the country that work on some of the same stuff that we're doing here. I went to a lot of sessions that kind of relate to a couple of the projects that I'll be working on here for the remainder of this year. I went to a couple that related to bicycle and pedestrian facilities in rural communities and in more urban communities, and how they go about addressing those barriers as far as active transportation and how they go about evaluating their network of facilities in their communities. So that'll really come in handy as we sort of move forward with that in our community. Same thing with housing as we move forward with providing more housing options and different housing options throughout the city of Raymore. I had a couple from San Francisco who obviously have some very different housing opportunities than we do here, but still it was great to hear what other communities are doing as well to network with other people who are facing some of these same issues. So like I said, it was a very eye-opening and very educational experience in New York City, and I hope that one day I can go back and keep learning. So thank you all again for allowing me the opportunity to go.
Good. Thank you, Mr. Grass. Mr. Cataract.
It was great to have a good Raymore contingency there. It was unfortunate city manager and council member Moorhead were not unable to go. I know they desperately wanted to be there, but weather kind of held them in Kansas City, unfortunately. An outstanding conference. One session Mr. Gress didn't identify, we actually went together on, that you may be seeing results on, was basically on staff reports. What should be in them, what shouldn't be, do we give you too much, do you even read them? So we'll be trying to make a review of what we learned. and see.
For the record, let me caution you, if it ain't broke, don't fix it.
Yeah, change can be difficult.
There's always room for improvement, isn't there?
There were great sessions. I targeted a lot of the technical sessions. We have upcoming projects working on the sign code, good session on that and the legal aspects of doing that. Housing's another item. One thing that did occur, we weren't able to participate in, but we made an application, Mr. Gress did, for recognition as Soul Smart community. We did that on the local level. If you remember back in Kansas, the Kansas City effort we did for gold level recognition. Well, this is a national program, and I think there's only about 50 communities in the nation that are actually certified under this program. We came in at the entry level of bronze, but we're through Mr. Gress's work, we're really just one certification away from gold. So we'll be moving forward with that. Be one of the, I think maybe only the third community in Missouri, perhaps, that would have any designation level of Soul Smart. Basically meaning that we're a solar-ready community. We do welcome the use of solar energy. In fact, Mr. Gress was looking at an application this week already for a commercial solar application. So it was nice for Raymore to get recognized on a national scale. So that was cool. We just weren't able to participate, again, because of the number of sessions that are going on. You can't possibly attend them all. But certainly a great experience. For 2018, pending budget approval, which we have been fortunate to get budget approval in the past for having a commissioner go, and staff will be looking at attending the conference. It'll be in April of 2018, and it's in New Orleans for us. So we certainly would hope that we can get the budget approval, put the request in again, and have a commissioner, representative, mayor, someone to be able to attend that conference to represent the commission. So we look forward to that.
Great. Now, thank you all. I think I'll just continue on down this side. Commissioner Meiske.
No comment.
Okay. Commissioner Bowie.
No further comments, thank you.
Okay, we'll go the other way and see how much better I can do. Vice Chair Pfizer, thank you very much for chairing our last meeting in my absence.
Well, thank you. It went okay. I didn't destroy the commission or anything, so I guess it was good. Other than that, no comment.
Okay. Secretary Crane.
No comment.
Let's see. Commissioner Sarsfield.
No comment.
Mayor Turnbow, I trust you have some good words for
Always
us.
have some good things to say about what's going on in Raymore. As you probably saw, Panda Express is open, and as I drove by, it was packed. So people are starting to use the new marketplace corner up there. K Jewelers open. The others will be following on board here shortly. We have, and as you know, we've got the open house ribbon cutting occurring on June the 16th for our new Centerview project. That will be in the afternoon. I think it's at, 3 or 4 in the afternoon, Jim? You remember? I can't remember either. We'll have another meeting before then, I assume,
Right.
Before that happens, though. But it's coming along great. We got all our windows in finally this week. They finally delivered the rest of the windows, I think, yesterday. I think got them all in, so we actually have all of our windows in now. So, but the interior's looking great. I've got the floors polished and the wood up. Of course, if you've driven behind it, you've seen the pergola up. It's looking really nice back there, and so it's things are going good. And that's really all I have right now.
That's good, though. Thank you for keeping us up to date. One thing about Raymore these days, there are a lot of things in work, as Mr. Eanes pointed out as well. There are a lot of things in work, and I think we're finally well on the road to recovery after 2008. It's taken quite a while, hasn't it? Yeah. Okay, so that was probably more than I intended to say. Thank you, staff. We always appreciate your work and very thorough research. Mr. Fleming, I trust Mr. Zur owes you yet another favor, and thank you for being here tonight. Good. Mr. Eanes, thank you very much. Commissioners, well, if we can get our newest commissioner present, we darn near had a full commission this evening, didn't we?
She, by the way, I did talk to her, and she was, had a previously arranged out-of-town event, because it kind of slipped up on her that we were appointing her this quickly.
Right, I
And,
was going to say, the appointment probably came fairly suddenly, so that's understandable. We'll look forward to
She's
meeting
looking forward to working with us.
her, and thank you all, the rest of us, for being here this evening. I would entertain a motion to adjourn unless commission has anything else.
Second.
Who was first?
You were.
Oh, okay. Motion to adjourn, second. All those in favor, raise a hand, please. Thank you, Commissioner Boyd. And that was 8